Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on MJ's Quiet Corner. I have a very special guest today, an author. Her name is Samantha Allan. We'll go ahead and get right to it. Now, Samantha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm an author. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Michelle. I am an author and a journalist. I write a column for a local publication, and I do a lot of like LGBTQ freelancing in the national journalism space. And I'm the author of Real Queer America, LGBT Stories from Red States, which is a travelogue about queer communities in more conservative parts of the country.
That sounds very, very interesting. And everybody, I'm going to make sure that I put the links for her books into the body of the YouTube blurb. So I'm excited to share her books with you. Now, have you written any other books, Samantha?
Yeah, a couple. They're shorter. And one is an ebook, and then one is only available on Audible. So it's not in print form. You can only listen to it. The first one is called Love and Estrogen. It's a relationship memoir about kind of falling in love while going through a gender transition. And then M to WTF, kind of a clunky title, a punny title. That is the Audible exclusive, and that is kind of a collection of humorous transition-related anecdotes, kind of an irreverent, like, memoir.
Right. Oh my goodness, that sounds good too. Wow. So when did you start writing your books, and why did you decide to write those or books for the LGBT community?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you are a trans writer like I am, you kind of walk this line between like how much of my life do I want to share, and then like how much do I feel a responsibility to share to like help people who come after me. And I started writing books because I was working with an editor on a piece about kind of like a personal essay about like my experience of like romance and love as a trans woman. And she went on to edit this kind of collection of true love stories for Amazon Original Stories and asked me if I would want to be included in that. That was, 2017, 2016. And I found the prospect of writing something that long form and that personal a little bit daunting, but I'd gotten so many messages about that first personal essay from people who were just grateful that something like that existed, who, were dealing with similar things and finally felt seen in those words, that I decided to go ahead and like do that larger, project. And that's what became Love and Estrogen, sort of a memoir about falling in love during my transition. And I was open and honest and talked about stuff beyond kind of like trans 101 topics. And that led into writing more books. And, ultimately, I think like whatever embarrassment I might feel about having so much of my story out there between the covers of books is just like overridden 100-fold by the messages you get from folks who say it helped them understand their own experiences or helped them come out. And that's so humbling to hear.
It is. And while you're writing it, I'm sure you were like, oh my God, did I just put that in there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you include embarrassing stuff. Yeah, but I think when you share that much, it invites people in. And there are readers out there who don't know anyone else who's out, I think too quickly after we come out, we can forget how isolating and alone it felt to be in the closet and kind of like, shut the door behind us a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think keeping that door open in our writing, our experiences, our conversation can help people who feel alone in a way that maybe we've too quickly forgotten about. I'm a survivor of open heart surgery. I, have gone through a gender transition. I have, a Mormon background, and leaving the Mormon church was very hard and painful for me. But I ask myself that classic question. A lot of people with compounding layers of trauma ask themselves, which is would I rather have a life without all of this? And ultimately, it's cliche, but those are the things that shape you into who you are and teach you what you apply to your life going forward. And I sort of couldn't imagine not having some of those experiences.
Right. Now let's talk about your coming out story. I'm very interested. The Mormon Church. This is going to be good. Go. Let's
Mormonism teaches that your gender is assigned to you before you're even born. So forget about gender assigned at birth. It's gender assigned in the premortal existence, And so, I grew up in a culture where we were taught that gender was eternal and premortal characteristic of your identity. And obviously not a very LGBTQ affirming faith, especially at the time that I was kind of coming of age within it. And, I have the classic, kind of almost stereotypical trans woman experience of I had these feelings from a very early age and couldn't make sense of them. And then I kind of grew up in this culture that kind of reinforced that, I was stuck. I was stuck in the body and the gender role that that God had put me in. And it took me it took me 24 years to fully shake free from that. I left the church when I was 21 in 2008, and I came out about 3 years later when I was in grad school.
Oh wow, that sounds very very emotional. It does. When you come out to your family and you leave a church, especially when you've grown up in that church all your life, I don't think that the religious communities understand what type of impact that has on us when we have to break away from them because they no longer serve a purpose that is healthy in our lives. And that break is very, very traumatic. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe sometimes to folks who didn't grow up in as rigid or as kind of all-consuming faith traditions as Mormonism was for me, but it was for a time, especially in late teenage years, early adulthood, my entire world, I couldn't imagine epistemologically something that existed outside of that belief system. It was how I saw everything, to the point that I literally thought that I would go to hell and suffer for all eternity if I acted on these feelings that I had about being trans and not being comfortable in the gender I'd been assigned. And I think sometimes you get the benefit of hindsight so quickly when you break free from it, that to even say that out loud now can feel ridiculous, that, oh, silly me that I once thought that. But that belief literally determined my emotional landscape for much of my life. And that's a kind of a horrifying space to live in. Yeah.
It is. And that was so powerful what you just said. Now when you are free, you look back at the way you thought before and you're wait, why did I think like that? And that's so powerful, because I know that there are so many people out there in the world who are stuck in that space. I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to be damned. I am not worthy of God because of what I've been taught in this rigid religion. And then once you were free, I get it, Samantha, because I don't even remember that stuff. I don't remember any of that. That is so powerful. Wow. That's
And
great.
I think writing is like my way of remembering it. You know, I feel like if I wasn't writing books kind of in the aftermath of some of those experiences, not too soon after, but enough after that I can kind of hold them at a distance and process them, analyze them. Um, that's my way of kind of like cataloging it for myself and hopefully helping others, because I feel like if I weren't doing that, it would just fly right out of my mind, and
Yes. So let's talk
yeah.
about you falling in love while on estrogen. Please, please explain that. Let's have that story, honey.
Yeah, sure. So, I came out in 2012 and started hormones pretty quickly thereafter. And, like, I think one of the fears that kept me away from coming out for a long time was the fear of like, who is going to date and like marry me. I've always been kind of like a hopeless romantic, but when you're growing up, like the only trans women you see on like TV or movies are these terrible depictions. I'm thinking of like Ace Ventura or something, where it's like someone kisses a trans woman and then they throw up or something. So you get this message of like, oh, I
Right.
would be disgusting if I were this kind of person. Someone would just like just have a terrible reaction to the idea of like dating me. And so that those were some of the anxieties that I felt. But like I ultimately decided like I need to be true to myself and come out, and I can't let this like fear override like my authentic self any longer. And sort of like a leap of faith scenario where not like 8 months after making that decision, I was in an elevator at a school where I was doing summer research in Indiana, and this beautiful woman gets in the elevator with me. We had a classic rom-com meet cute moment. Her name was Corey. She was also in Indiana doing research for the summer, and we kind of fell in love. She had never she's attracted to women, but had never dated a trans woman before. And my favorite story from that time is that I would be talking about stuff like estradiol or spironolactone, or like I would be using all the trans lingo, and she would like run to the bathroom and like Google it so that like you know
Yeah, that's so sweet. She wanted
she
to be
didn't.
involved with you. She wanted to be in your world. Now, what I find very interesting is another powerful nugget you just said. When I decided to be free, that's when things fell into place for me romantically. That is powerful as well. What 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 was the motivation behind making that decision to decide to be free? To coming from a religious background, coming from a family that was following the rigidity of the Mormon religion. What was it that made you make that decision?
Yeah, so I had left Mormonism in 2008. Fast forward to like 2011, 2012. I'm more open about exploring my gender because I'm not in the church anymore, but I'm still like have close relationships to my family. I'm dating folks who aren't in the queer community necessarily, um, and then starting to date more folks in the queer community. And then I like I remember having a moment with a friend and who said sort of like, you seem so much you seem like you would be so much happier if you transitioned. Like, why don't you? And I gave my usual list of reasons. I'm like, what would my parents say? Who would employ me? Like, would I be able to find work? Would I be able to like get married? Like, what you like all of this stuff. And this friend said, those are all reasons about other people. Like, what do you want to do? And I guess I had never been forced to consider that question in isolation. I guess in part, I was so like, overcoated by fear and anxiety that I hadn't allowed myself to consider it. And also, I'd been conditioned by probably my faith background and also our society for that to feel selfish, I think, for me to sit and ask myself, like, what do I want and don't I deserve that? That really unlocked things for me, that question. And it was, a few weeks later that I started kind of privately coming out to a few folks.
Now, do you think that your religion had an impact on the way that you perceive your selfishness in that moment? Because I know in the Christian religion, they teach you to be humble. They teach women to make sure that they follow the rules and stay submissive and all that stuff. So would you say that your religious background contributed to you not being able to consider what it is that you want?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mormonism, like a lot of faith traditions, like teaches you that like you need to deny yourself in this life in order to like get the reward in the life to come. You need to, and I think sometimes that can motivate you to have good behaviors, like I don't know, like not being too reckless or too indulgent, or I don't know, all of this stuff. But applied to the realm of gender and sexuality, like it seems to come to mean like you can't be yourself now. You have to wait until the great hereafter for that to happen.
Right.
And that was no longer working for me. What is the point of being alive if you can't feel like you're yourself, like you can exist in your own skin before you die,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, with all this newfound freedom, and with all of this liberation on your part, how is your relationship with God?
The deep questions. I love it. I still feel like I believe in God broadly framed, and I believe and hope for life after death. But it's more loose, it's broader, it's not tied to any specific organization or practice right now. But it took a long time to get to that spot. I think for a good 5 to 7 years after leaving Mormonism, I first just felt like angry and then bitter, and then I just wholesale rejected all of that. And then kind of the older I got and the more I got away from that particular trauma, I started allowing myself to be open to those kind of broader philosophical and spiritual questions again. And I think many LGBTQ people have similarly bad experiences with religion, but there are plenty of LGBTQ folks who are religious or who have found affirming religions after leaving another faith. And I think that's a beautiful part of queer experience to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how did your family react to you marrying a woman? Did they come to the wedding? What happened there?
Well, we eloped in a Florida courthouse, so the only person who was at our wedding was a city hall officiant who had never met us before. But they were supportive. I think obviously they come from the Mormon faith as well, and that kind of codes and determines some of how they initially approached the idea of me being trans and me being queer and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they're also just parents, and good parents, like the ones I'm fortunate to have, ultimately care about their children being happy, and I think for me, that was the kind of the endurance game. Was I came out and I wanted them to like get it right away and accept me right away, and I didn't want to have to jump through any hoops or like prove myself in any way. And in an ideal world, maybe that would happen. Some folks coming out might have that experience with really affirming parents, but I think ultimately I realized that, well, I just need to keep living my life, and they'll see that I'm happy and that this is not some weird phase or like some, like lark that I'm on or something I'm trying out. They'll see that it's like who I am and how I was meant to be. And that's what happened. And it took patience and it took some waiting, but I have a really good relationship with my family now.
That's good. That's amazing. You are very lucky. Not a lot of people have that story. Now, if you could give advice to younger trans people, the younger trans in the queer community, all of them, doesn't matter who they are, what would be your advice? What would you tell them to do?
Well, first of all, I would just thank them for being brave, for being here, for even thinking about coming out in a world where there's still such like a target on our backs, and where as we become more visible, we're having to deal with still more backlash. And I would say, like, don't let your fears of the future like determine who you need to be, because the only way that like we can create that trans affirming future is together, is if we all kind of collectively shed that fear and come out and come out to our friends, our families, our faith groups, our community leaders, and really kind of like change things from the inside out.
Wow. Are there any resources that you would recommend for a trans woman that's coming into her own, that's developing her beauty and just making the world aware that she's a beautiful girl?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many publications that are creating great content for trans community. Teen Vogue has trans affirming content, Them has Them, which is Condé Nast's LGBTQ publication, has good stuff for trans folks. The Trevor Project is a great resource for LGBTQs of all sorts. And for moments when you're feeling low, or like you can't go on, or you just need to talk to somebody who gets it, Trans Lifeline is there. You can give folks at Trans Lifeline a ring, and they'll talk you through how you're feeling. So yeah, there's so many resources and supports out there now for folks to lean on.
That's amazing. Are you going to work on anything else? Are there any more books that are coming out from Samantha Allan?
I'm working on. I'm trying to write a fiction book right now. I won't say that much more about it because I'm superstitious about talking about things that like haven't fully materialized yet. But it's a thriller. It's a kind of a social media thriller. Yeah.
Ooh, sounds interesting, juicy. Well, that's awesome. Samantha, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I really, really want to have you back to just empower people. Whatever you're working on, I'm going to follow you. Like, I'm not going to stalk you, but I'm going to follow you.
Okay, sounds good.
Stuff come out, I'm going to have you on the show to talk about it, because it's so important for us to be visible to the world. It's so important for us to be proud of who we are in front of the world, because people won't respect us unless we're proud of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? They won't take us seriously unless we have confidence in ourselves. So Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope you guys have a good day. Okay, now.
Yeah.